Hey Better Architects, Tony here. Now, today's subject is Elon Musk. He's in the news a lot, and well, that's because what he has to say apparently is really important. Look at all those views, those likes, those tweets. Even this one that has almost nothing in there. So what he has to say is important, right? Because apparently when he speaks, people listen. So what does Elon Musk have to do with architects? Well, as you can already guess, he said something. Something I disagree with. Let's get into it. Now, a little while back, in December 2021, CNBC published an article where they quoted Elon Musk saying, all these other titles are basically made up. So CEO is a made up title. CFO is a made up title. They don't mean anything. And of course, this article goes on to note that he assumed the CEO position of Tesla in 2008, and he changed his title to the Techno King of Tesla. And it still remains today in the company's corporate governance statement. Yeah, but what does that have to do with architecture firms, Tony? Well, it has everything to do with architecture firms, I say, as well as the rest of the world actually, because it has everything to do with your titles. You know, the thing that we flex or hide to our architect friends whenever we have a gathering. I think I know what Elon means when he says titles doesn't mean anything. I think he's responding to the stigma, positive or the negative, but mostly the negative, that's been given to the executive roles such as CEO, CFO, and etc. Now, Elon is an influential person, there's no doubt about that. So when he throws out the title, many tech companies and companies in other industry, like architecture firms, will follow suit blindly, and that's a problem. Now, this is not new just because Elon said it, but companies have already started doing this a while back. Elon's public declaration is to make this kind of statement more acceptable in the eye of the public. Now, before I explain why it's bad, let me first explain the areas where him and I agree. Titles are made up. CEO, Chief Executive Officer, CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and other C-level titles didn't exist before the 1900s. According to a very long article from strategyplusbusiness.com, the term Chief Executive Officer was believed to be created in 1917. You see, before that era, companies were owned by one person or family, and they were the boss and ruled like monarchs. Whatever they say goes because, well, it was their company. But Henry Ford started something different with his company. He started raising the wages of his employees, even though his business and other businesses like his have dominated the market and there's plenty of workers. Henry wanted the wage increase to empower them so that they could have more purchasing power for the products that they were producing. I mean, it's no fun. Only 10% of the population can afford the stuff that Ford was producing? No, he wanted his workers to be able to afford it too. Of course, the other companies didn't like that because now they have to increase wages, right? But this shift changed the way that companies were built, and by the 1960s, the C-suite has matured. The role of CEO became more managerial, and they no longer needed to be owners of the company. As companies became much bigger for just one person to oversee, the burden of responsibilities are distributed. Why is this so hard to say? Who wrote this?
You wrote it, Mr. CEO.
Oh, that's me. The burden of responsibilities are distributed amongst the C-suites, where they have the last word in decision making. There's of course a lot more to it than that, and it's an interesting read for sure. I have the link down in the description below in case you're interested. But at the end of the day, the CEO title was made up. But just because it was made up doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. You see, scientists have been identifying things throughout history. They label creatures with specific physical attributes, and thus the label is now attached to the physical properties of the animal. For example, the word insect describes animals with an exoskeleton and have 6 legs. A beetle is a common insect, so is an ant. But a spider is not an insect, nor is a centipede. They may have exoskeletons, but they don't have 6 legs. So the word bug encompasses all these little creatures. When you attribute characteristics to a label and use it enough, the label then becomes a way to quickly tell people what you mean without having to recite a Wikipedia entry about it. So, when my wife sees a spider, she's not going to scream, "Ah! Ah! I see an 8-legged creature with an exoskeleton that is able to spin webs on the wall." No, instead she just screams, "Ah! I see a spider on the wall!" And then I go and I crush it. No, I'm just kidding. Sometimes I take it out and throw it in the backyard. I also attend a Bible study group, and we're going through Genesis right now. In Genesis chapter 2, you see Adam naming animals. Now, did you know that he just made those names up? So apparently a lot of things are just made up. But what's not important is that the names are made up. But what is important is that there is universal agreement to what the made up words mean. Those names point to something. Now, getting back to the original issue. Why are people doing this? Why are people throwing away traditional titles? Why are they rejecting the titles CEO and CFO? Because they're crazy. No, I'm just kidding. Or am I? Yes, I am. Maybe. The reason it's happening is because of this thing called Deconstructionism, which is not a topic of this video, and I'm gonna push it aside. What has happened with the traditional titles is that people who are CEOs or CFOs are held in high regard. They are, after all, well, most of the time, the founders of the company. And at the end of the day, they have the last say. Now, all this power can quickly go to their heads. On a side note, Elon Musk with his Techno King title still is doing what he's doing every day, from day to day. He's the only one that can go on Twitter and make bold claims on the things that he will do and do them in his company. He was the only one that was able to approve Tesla's recent price drop. I mean, there's more to it than that, of course, as the board and all this other stuff, but still, that's his decision to make. Now, his roles and responsibility hasn't changed, even though his title has. You see, when CEOs do their job well, the whole company prospers and the customers and the clients are greatly benefited by their products or services. This then gives fame and fortune to the great CEOs like Henry Ford, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, yes, and even Elon here, and likewise the title rises with them. They become people who others look to aspire to and imitate, which are great things. Then you have people who are in the C-level position abusing the power of the role. Anyone who starts a company today can be the CEO of their own company. Heck, I'm the CEO of Better Architects. What then happens is that the title of the CEO gets abused by people who don't understand the role, and then the title gets dragged through the mud. That's not something I'll do. Just like a rose by any other name is still a rose, a CEO by any other name is still CEO because the responsibilities that the title demands in order for a business to survive is still the same. Even if you have the title but you're not fulfilling those roles, you're not really a CEO and the company will fail. It's not the title that's important. It's the actions that are being done to progress the entire company towards its goals that's important. Just like you'll be helping Better Architects move towards its goals by liking this video and subscribing to this channel. And the goal of this video is to help others understand the importance of titles. Another reason titles are important is that they tell people inside and outside of your organization your role and responsibilities. In an architecture firm, titles such as director, principal, or even prefixes such as senior gives others a clue about what it is that they do in the company. A quick Google search will tell you what all these titles do in the context of an architecture firm. By the way, architecture firms do have C-level titles because that's on the organization documents when they apply to become a business. But that's not usually disclosed to the firm. Instead, the C-level is usually replaced by the word principal, and with the founding principal usually being the CEO equivalent. There's also a financial principal, which you guessed it is the CFO. Larger companies also have a CTO because, well, technology is at the foundation of what people do, and somebody has to manage all of that. I think you get the idea. Now, with this role and responsibility hierarchy, what tends to happen is that people let these titles get to their heads, and some, not many, may have abused the power for their own gain. Shocking, right? I mean, this was commonly abused in the 70s and the 80s, in the 90s, of course, where the people at the top exudes an "I'm better than thou" attitude while looking down at you from their noses. I kind of never actually knew what that meant, until I saw on a Simpsons episode or something like that. They're always talking to you like this, like this, like this. And then they look down their nose because they have to like kind of look downward because their head is still so tilted back. "I'm better than thou." This inflated ego has done a lot of damage to the people that were abused, as well as the title itself, to the point that companies are associating these titles with the negative characteristics or the bad personas that these terrible C-level figures have displayed. So they overcorrect and they throw the baby out with the bathwater by getting rid of these titles altogether or making up their own titles. When they tout a flat organization, I believe what they really mean is that they want an organization where people are treated equally with respect and dignity, and no one is deserving of more or less respect because of their titles. Now, I'm in 100% agreement with that statement. As human beings, we are to treat one another the way that we ourselves want to be treated. But the negative and unintended consequence is that the responsibilities of the role gets really foggy. And that's where the trouble begins. Let me explain. When you're on a team of 5 with everyone having equal respect for each other, people tend to always soft push for a decision. There is no firmness in the decision because everybody wants to be respectful of each other's opinions. And what ends up happening is that a decision is made by the committee where everyone is somewhat satisfied. I've seen this way too often. Heck, I probably have contributed to this myself. When you have decisions made by a committee, whether it's a design decision or a company direction decision, the results are mediocre at best. The company does not need a decision that satisfies everyone's emotions, but instead, it needs a decision that helps move the company closer to its goals. The person who is responsible in meeting that goal gets the say. After all, what I've seen too much is that people are promoted to these positions without good understanding of what these positions do, and instead, they just continue to do what they're good at. An example of this is if you're promoted from job captain to a project manager, your day-to-day task will look very different, but you should be informed on what a project manager's duty and be mentored by someone who is considered to be a great project manager. But I don't think this happens at all. Comment down below if this is the trend that you're seeing in your company, or if your company has a really good promotion system and with great mentorship. I'd be curious to know. What's worse is, in an architecture company, when a CEO doesn't understand the role of a CEO and behaves like a typical architect. That means instead of working on the company and overseeing everything, he or she is designing projects, going to client meetings, working in the model. I mean, sure, in the beginning when the company is small, you don't have to dedicate that much time to building up the company. But when the company gets bigger, you become less and less involved with the projects and then more and more involved in the health and the well-being of the company as an organism. I mean, unless this company is a startup, this person that's not doing the role of the CEO is most likely struggling to survive. Now, going back to Elon Musk, he changed his title to Techno King. But at the end of the day, Techno King is just another name for CEO because his role and responsibility at the company has not changed. If there is one takeaway from this, I would say that architecture principles must know the roles and responsibilities of each title to a T. If your title description is vague, then people will have a vague sense of their responsibilities, and the excellence is determined by their own personal standards, which may or may not meet the standards of the principles. And if the next level up is something like everything in the previous role plus these additional responsibilities, then that's just nonsense because there aren't enough hours in the day to do everything. Responsibilities for each title is unique to that title and is determined by what the project requires, which will be covered in a future video. It is in my experience that principals in smaller architecture firms does not thoroughly explain and train the staff for a promotion. Instead, they promote people that they feel are ready, and because no one wants to hurt their feelings, the other principals agree, not knowing that they've just helped someone rise to the level of their incompetence. Let me know in the comments below if that's been true in your experience, like when someone has been promoted to PM and it's been a few years and you know everybody on their team wants to leave to another team. Well, that's it. That's all I wanted to say about titles. It's important. Yeah. If you stayed to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching and looking forward to sharing more with you in the near future. See you later. That's my imitation of my wife.